Hello, my name is Joanna Bourke, and I'm the Principal Investigator for the SHAME project. SHAME, of course, standing for Sexual Harms and Medical Encounters. And today we have a great treat. I'm going to be speaking to Dimitra Vassiliadou, who is an Adjunct Lecturer at the Hellenic Open University. But we are really, really pleased to also announce that she is an Associate Fellow of SHAME. So welcome, Dimitra. Let's just start by asking you how you became interested in working on sexual violence. I mean, it's a tough and very difficult subject.
Hello, Joanna, and thank you for having me. I was thinking of saying a bit about my previous research interests that somehow led me to research sexual violence, because I think it's important. I will be very brief in that. This is a somehow existential question, what kind of historian I am. And today I'd say that I am a social and cultural historian with a special interest in the history of emotions and the family, gender history, the history of sexuality, and lately of sexual violence. I have been working for many years, for more than a decade, on the historical construction of family emotional culture in Greece in the long 19th century. And in this work, I was interested in tracing the emotional vocabularies of family emotions, and to reflect on gender aspect and affect, and of course to explore the hierarchies fitted in the frame of family emotions. And I ended up working on the emotion of love. And that was my PhD, and that was the topic of my first monograph. And soon after that, somehow my taste as a researcher changed. And instead of seeking emotions that produced relevancy between kin, I turned to unruly emotions, to fear, to melancholy, to sadness, to anger. And this is the topic of the monograph I'm working right now, that draws on autobiographical and medical discourses and explores the historical transformation of specific emotions into illnesses. At the same time, over the last 4 or 5 years, I developed an interest in sex, in heteronormative sex inside and outside marriage. So in my background, when I first visited the legal files from the Aegean Islands in the General State Archives of Greece, and it was a huge and a very impressive archival collection, a very good read. And I knew this time that I wanted to work on sexuality and crime. I also knew that I wanted to draw heavily on legal sources, these fascinating sources for social historians, and rape incidents immediately attracted my attention. First, we knew nothing about it was literally terra incognita. And second, it was quite clear from the very beginning that these sources could take me beyond the crime itself, into the social and cultural worlds in which the initial act, the sexual attack, took place. And in my case, this was the world of lower strata in rural environments of Greece, in the islands. And I was determined to work for the very first time with this strata, because before I was working mostly with urban middle classes. So this is of course half of the story of how I became interested in sexual violence, because the other half has to do with the timeliness, I would say, of such a research for Greece. The emergence of rape and sexual violence as a human rights issue showed very clearly that it is not merely a personal trauma, which it is, but it is also a matter of politics, a matter of public policy, and a matter of gender and equal relations. So in the summer of 2019, there were two crimes in Greece that gained huge, enlarged publicity. In both cases, the victims were raped and then murdered. In both cases, the perpetrators were arrested, tried, and sentenced for life. And I need to clearly state the names now. They're very well-known cases for Greece, but it's important to say the names. I'm talking now about the rape and murder of Hellenic Vassiliadou in Rhode Island, and the rape and murder of Susan Eaton in Crete. Both cases immediately became frontlines in the press, in social media, everywhere. And soon after, especially the first one of Hellenic Vassiliadou, soon after this crime and the immediate conviction of the culprits, there was a huge movement in Greece, and public awareness against rape and sexual violence emerged for the very first time, not only within the feminist circles, as usual, but more broadly. And so it was clearly the time to know more about sexual violence in Greece, historically as well. And finally, a practical reason, I managed to secure twice a funding for this research. The first one was in 2020. It was a one-year grant from the Research Center for the Humanities to work on sexual crimes in Greece. And lately, after a successful application for a larger research project that will explore rape in 20th century Greece.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting because, I mean, I guess what some people listening may want to know is why history? I mean, you talk very eloquently about how timely this project is in terms of current concerns within Greece and indeed globally. But what do you think that history as a discipline can give? After all, you're proposing to look at the period from 1900 to 1960s, I believe. So why history, and why that period of history? Why is it relevant?
First of all, this new research project, which is a 3-year research project, starts from 1900 to 1960. So it's a history of the 20th century. I always believed that especially sexual violence, it's a topic that's not important only for historical research and historical narratives, because it also applies to modern concerns. And I think it's very important to take history into the public realm and discover how historical concerns about sexual violence in the past apply to modern concerns against sexual harassment, rape culture, sexual abuse of children. And it's important to create channels of communication between historians and the public, and this specific topic is ideal for that. Maybe I should say a bit more about my current research project, and this will become, I think, more obvious.
Yes, this is the project called Brutal Desire? Is that what it's called?
It is the title is Brutal Intimacies: A History of Rape in Modern Greece, 1900-1960s.
Okay, tell us about the project.
Okay, yeah, and I'm very, very happy and glad to have you as a member in the scientific board. This is a 3-year project. It's funded by the Hellenic Foundation for Research and Innovation, and hosted at the Social Anthropology and History Department at the University of the Aegean. So this is a project that brings to the fore for the very first time this significant understudied topic in Greek history, the history of rape. And because this subject is practically absent from local academic literature, it aims to trigger, first of all, the research on this cutting-edge topic, namely rape incidents that provoked extralegal behaviors and legal measures in Greece from the beginnings of the 20th century until late 60s. We are a rather small research group. We are 5 altogether, and in the following 3 years, we will aim to discuss how individuals, families, communities, and the state in Greece acted to regulate the sexual crime of rape. There are, of course, several ways through which we may approach sexual violence historically, and our project proposes to do so by examining first a set of legal sources from 3 major Greek cities, that is Athens, Piraeus, and Patra, and the Aegean Islands, because we want to compare rural and urban environments. A second step for our research would be to investigate press coverage of rape incidents as a means responsible for the popular dissemination of narratives of sexual violence. A third pillar for the understanding of sexual violence as a form of criminal offense in Greece would be the Greek statutory laws, how they changed over time, and the different interpretations from penologists, legislators, and jurists in Greece. And there is a final feature of sexual violence that is to be explored, and that concerns sexual atrocities during warfare that involved Greek civilians and Greek fighters. So we are adopting this multiple methodological strategy in order to explore rape at the same time as a crime, as a public scandal, as individual experience, as war crime, and offense against common morals.
I've been thinking about your project over the last few weeks, and I've heard you obviously speaking about it here in Athens last year before COVID, and talking to a lot of historians here in Greece. And one thing that they said time and again when I was talking to them about your work is, "Oh, this is extremely innovative. We don't do that kind of history much here in Greece. There's not this larger context of working on topics such as sexual violence." So I think one of the things I wanted to ask you was, why do you think that this topic has been, relatively speaking, unexplored in the Greek context? And the second question, which is related to that, is, and therefore, what are some of the challenges, some of the difficulties, problems that you and the rest of the team are facing when you look at such a topic?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this question. It's legitimate, I think. I think that the lack of interest of Greek historians to deal with this topic has to do, first of all, with the fact that Greece is a very small country and our historical community is equally small. Of course, we have to connect this absence with the directions that academic history followed since the 1980s, which is a period of expansion for universities in Greece, because it mainly considered political history, the history of state, the history of institutions, and economy. And these were the main subjects taught in the universities, and these were the main subjects reproduced through PhDs until recently. I mean, it's not a coincidence that gender history, historians of gender history in Greece were marginalized from the very beginning. Although we had fascinating historians working on the subject since then. And it won't come as a surprise if I tell you that still, up to this day, there's not a single faculty position in Greece on gender studies, let alone gender history. And I think that all this, and I have to say this is my opinion, I think that the rise of social and cultural history in Greece is not going very far up to this day. So all these parameters, I think, that are responsible for this absence. But things are changing.
You'll change things, sure.
So of course, this fact that I mentioned so emphatically, the absence, is challenging.
Yes.
For us. And it's of course good, because doing such a research in Greece is first of all innovative. At the same time, after at least 5 decades of international scholarship on the topic, we know that we are not inventing the wheel. So because we have first to clear the ground, we have to ask very basic research questions, such as how did the Greek legal system handle sexual violence in the past, or which kind of cultural and social interpretations of sexual violence were dominant in Greece, and how did they change over time. And we know that these questions have long been answered in other national states, and this creates some kind of, uncomfortable feeling to the researcher that wants to dig deeper. But you have also to remind oneself that you're not just interested in adding a new national case to those already known, which of course I'm going to do, and it is important. But you also want to compare your findings and compare sexual violence incidents in Greece with others relevant cases from other states. And this comparison will help similarities and differences to emerge, and maybe help to center a bit the dominant historical paradigms. So another one, now we're talking about challenges, right? Another one of the challenges relates to the existing primary sources in Greece and accessibility. Pre-trial and trial documents in Greece before the 20th century are highly scattered, and they do not compose successive series suitable for qualitative and quantitative analysis. And whenever available, access depends on the goodwill of the understaffed general state archive employees. And this same problem with the primary sources extends to present day data. So I suspect that it would be impossible, or at least very, very difficult, to locate and access material connected to contemporary forms of sexual violence, for example, in the very few centers that treat domestic violence in Greece. And this problem is directly linked to the ethical issues, which is still unclear in Greece and unsolved. I mean, we had a new law relating to data protection access policy, but it's still unclear. And I'm afraid that most institutions that hold material which is suitable for contemporary research on sexual violence will probably close their doors to researchers without exception from fear of being outlawed. So it's hard doing such a research in Greece.
Yes, it's hard, but it is also so rewarding. And we're really, really looking forward to seeing what you conclude at the end of this project. Just one final question then that kind of relates or moves on quite neatly from what you've just said, and that is early career scholars today. What would you say to a early career Greek scholar who was thinking of working in this field? What sort of advice would you give?
I think I would give the advices that I give also myself. Uh, First of all, I think we all agree that researching sexual violence is of paramount importance. And not only, we talked about that before, about the history itself, but for present day. So my first advice is, of course, to disseminate the results of your research to academic audiences, but also create channels of communication between the historian and the public. This is very important, especially for Greece. Because we need to raise public awareness against violence, sexual violence, and rape still, and history gives us this opportunity. The second advice I would give is that since sexual violence remains incomplete, and you know better, I mean, because some countries have received far more coverage than others. We know more about the Anglo-Saxon world. I would encourage the research on sexual violence in the non-English speaking world, and Greece is one of them. And I will encourage them also to use the tools of comparative history, not only because they allow us to draw similarities and differences across boundaries of nation, but because they allow us to compare within the same nation regarding sexual violence. For example, I don't know, urban versus rural, middle class versus working class, ethnic and religious differences, etc. And I have, I think, a final thing that I wanted to say, and this is to encourage young scholars to be brave enough and to try to find compelling answers to difficult questions. And I would like to illustrate that with a paradigm from my own personal experience, and I will close with that. Recently, and you know that, I wrote a piece on women who lied about being raped in the first decades of the 20th century in Greece. And I wanted to know why these girls, these women and their families stood before police and legal authorities and reported, according to my sources, a consensual sexual relation as a sexual attack. And that was a very tricky question for myself. I mean, and I really faced many difficulties in writing this piece because I knew that I was discussing one of the long-standing banalities about sexual violence, the idea that women reporting their rape more often than not lie. And I've managed to relieve myself only when I faced openly the very difficult question of possession, of periodization and interpretation. And only then I knew that I was not discussing about women that lied, but that was just my starting point in order to analyze rape as a product of gender, age, and class inequalities, and I was able to delve deeper into the social values, the social cultural worlds, and the gender relations of these populations, these lowest strata from the Greek islands in the historical specificity.
Great. Dimitra Vassiliadou, thank you so much for talking to us, and we really look forward to hearing more about this project. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.